Howdy, my name is Noelle Mooney, and I titled my project A River Revival. So, for the Ecological Symposium, I attended Dr. Julian D. Olden's project or presentation on just how protected are America's rivers. Now, I titled mine A River Revival because Julian D. Olden talks about the need to protect America's rivers. Julian D. Olden is a professor at the University of Washington, and he has published over 500 publications in the last 25 years. Not only is he a dedicated professor, but he's also a dedicated researcher. In Dr. Olden's presentation, he claims that fresh waters are the heartbeat of our land and rivers are the arteries. However, fresh waters and rivers specifically are often blocked by dams, polluted, and left unprotected. And he specifically says that terrestrial areas are protected significantly more than rivers. And he asks his audience to really question why this is. Why do we leave rivers so unprotected when they are kind of the life source of the land? They provide fresh waters for basically all animals. And not only do they do that, but they are a source of life. They have abundant biodiversity in plant life and animal life. So his two goals kind of in this presentation were really to raise awareness and to figure out ways we can protect and restore our rivers. Now, investigation time. So specifically, his hypothesis and research questions, I divided into three parts. The first one is, how protected are rivers? The second, how can we develop more ways to protect rivers? And the third, how do we provide awareness? So, to really understand what Julian D. Olden talks about, we have to understand what a protected river is. And during his presentation, two words really stuck out to me: preserve and safeguard. So, preserve means basically like maintain the river, and not only maintain the river, but also its ecosystem of plants and animals. So, how do we keep it in a natural interrupted state? And this can be done such as stopping dams from being built. The other word that really came to mind was safeguard. So specifically safeguard and safeguard it from what? Defend it from human interference and harm, from pollution, from dams, from sediment erosion into rivers caused by human interference. And he also stated that protection should provide a broad range of benefits to people and nature. And I thought this was interesting because protecting rivers is important not only because the rivers are a place of abundant life for plants and animals. We should protect this nature because it is beautiful and it deserves to be protected in and of itself. But also, protected rivers will provide benefits to humanity. For example, protected rivers equals protected drinking water. And this is a really huge thing nowadays because populations are growing and we're seeing a rise in needing more drinking water. But it could be just as simple as protecting these rivers from pollution, from dams. He also said that protection must be dedicated, secure, and enforceable. So essentially dedicated, we must dedicate time, resources, money, effort to these protections. Secure, so it must be secure specifically by a state or federal law so that people will actually follow it. And enforceable in a way that it is something that is realistic. It's not some law or protection that harms humans so much that we can't enforce it. So it has to be practical, right? This idea there's no antagonist, protagonist, but sometimes it's in the gray. So protecting natural life, plant and animal life, but then also providing benefits to people. Now, to assess exactly how many rivers or what percentage of rivers are really protected in the United States, Dr. Olden and his team assess these rivers in five different ways. So essentially, there's five different ways that rivers could really be protected, or five different types of protection. The first was the river-specific protection, which seeks to prevent threats in its legislation on preserving the free-flowing character of rivers. So essentially, it's protecting rivers from pollution, from maybe dams, from like human interference, and it's like the whole river is being protected specifically from mostly human threats. The second is the riparian and floodplain protection. So it's a mechanism that seeks to protect, restore, and enhance water quality, and it's protecting rivers, but also their floodplains. So essentially, when like rivers swell and go over their banks into what's called their floodplains, so those areas also need to be protected, and those areas are important for like water quality and also for just plant and animal life. Third, the endangered species protection. So it's designation of critical habitat protection for endangered animals. And essentially, it's when a river is protected because it is a habitat for endangered species. So oftentimes, if rivers maybe have some new or salamander that's critical danger, then that river is protected because it's home. So this is a really good way that a lot of our rivers can be protected. Four, there's the terrestrial protected areas. So this area or this protection protects terrestrial lands, maybe like a national park, like Yosemite, for example. So it doesn't specifically protect any rivers in there, but because the rivers are in there, it is protected. So it's not specifically for rivers, but it does help to protect them. Fifth, multiple use lands. So this kind of protection will protect rivers because they're on land that is used for timber production, for example, or outdoor recreation or wildlife habitat protection. So it's similar to the terrestrial area because it helps rivers to be protected, but it's not specifically made for rivers. Now, after Dr. Julian Olden and his team compiled all of their research, they made an unfortunate discovery, and one that shocked me as well. They discovered that only 19% of US rivers are somewhat protected, and only 3% of rivers are fully protected. And you can look up any river in the US and discover how protected it is using the Protected River Index of the US. And it rates how protected the river is on a scale of 0 to 5. However, during their research, they found out that many protected rivers have unprotected watersheds. So basically, their source of water, maybe it's like the mountain or mountain stream that it comes from is unprotected, but that's the source of water that flows down the mountain into the river. So that needs to be protected as well. And they're also oftentimes disconnected from their floodplains. So when they overflow those banks, those floodplains won't be protected as well. And they also discovered that they have no layered protection or safeguards. So that means that maybe a river is protected because it's on a multiple use land for timber protection. But once that timber protection ceases, that river won't be protected anymore. So we should have layer protection to make sure that those rivers stay protected, even if something happens to one of those safeguards. My reaction is honestly, I was shocked. I was floored. I thought rivers were more protected, and I thought, why are rivers less protected than terrestrial lands? They're just as rich with biodiversity, with plant and animal life. And it made me think maybe it's just because often terrestrial land we can see with our eyes, but sometimes maybe rivers, fresh waters, there's so much happening underneath that we miss. And it really made me think on a thesis I did in high school on marine desalination, which I titled The Monster Below the Surface. And it discovered and talked about how consumerist humans are, and specifically Americans, and how we love to just create new technology instead of preserving what we have, how we love to create marine desalination technology to turn salt water into fresh water instead of maybe conserving water that we already had, or using rainwater harvesting or wastewater recyclement to preserve and conserve that water we had. So my main thought was we need to be less focused on consuming and more focused on protecting. And it really made me think of one key word: stewardship. We only have one Earth. So sometimes why are we so focused on producing something new instead of taking care and preserving what we have? So what can you do? What can I do? I say that we can consume less, we can save water, and we can raise awareness. Speak out to your friends in college, have discussions, maybe do a project on it, and just talk about it with your friends, your family members, anybody you really come in contact to. So the takeaways: how protected are rivers? Number one, 19% are somewhat protected and 3% fully protected. How can we develop ways to protect rivers? We can raise awareness. Rivers are just as important as terrestrial ecosystems, and we can advocate for specific river protections, and not just because they're in a terrestrial land. Rivers are just as important and just as full with life and biodiversity. And three, how do we provide awareness? I'd say that we could talk about the river or protected river index of the US, make sure it gets out there, let this wonderful website be known, talk to your friends, talk to your peers, talk to your family members, and really just, I think, speak out and use whatever platform you have to talk about, I think, conservation and preservation. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you, Dr. Olden and your team, for your wonderful research.